Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Say Again, a weekly podcast where I get to talk to change makers, thought leaders, incredible people about their expertise and what makes them tick. I'm so happy to be in conversation today with the super talented Vidya Shah, an award winning musician. She's a singer, a composer, and writer. Vidya, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us on Say Again.
Thanks, Amrita. Happy to be here. Thank you so much.
I want to start by asking with you a little bit. We're going to cover different themes in this conversation with you. But to start with, you're a classical vocalist. I was just reading an interview, though, which you had done, which, unlike a lot of classicists, I feel that you were saying that music needs to be accessible to people, that even traditional music needs to keep evolving. Can you take us through a little bit of the context there and your broader philosophy on classical music?
That's a really it's a broad question and it's a lot of my life.
Yes. Sum it up. It's like, no, I'm just kidding. How important do you think it is for people to understand that there's a way in? It doesn't have to be something that's remote, that's only sort of
Yeah.
very puritanically guarded, etc. What are your thoughts around
See,
that?
I'm going to preface my own journey by saying that music, even for the performer, is a very personal, subjective, emotional experience. And so each one of us connects with it in our own ways. And in that connection lies our training, lies our life's experiences, lies our upbringing, our social networks, all of that. So it's really what I perform on stage becomes an amalgamation of all of this. So I think, therefore, for every artist to be able to define what is classical and what is accessible, therefore, is different. So whatever one says comes from a certain grammatical framework, which is very central to anything that is classical, but it also then combines with a personal, you know, sort of an emotional connect with one's practice. I grew up in a South Indian household. It's really par for the course. You either learn music or dance, which is quite common in most South Indian households. So I also had one teacher who would promptly arrive Tuesdays and Fridays at 4 p.m. without fail, much to my complete sort of irritation in the initial years, because you don't want to sit and keep repeating something which doesn't make too much sense to you. And but over the years, when I sort of matured with my music and I started diving deeper into the language of it and into its offerings, I became much more aware of why that drudgery is important and why, you may dislike it, but going through it is important for you to come into your next phase of understanding your music. So therefore, I think the fact that I come from a certain family background, my father was interested in music, my mother plays the veena, but I also had a mainstream formal education. So I think all of that combines into this idea where I want more people to understand the beauty of this. And while people sort of may not necessarily intellectually be able to engage with it for whatever reasons, but at an emotional level, a lot of people engage with classical. But increasingly, there is also this worry that it's very abstract, it's too slow, it's even boring sometimes. I think comes from the reference point that it's hard to engage with it if you don't know what it's conveying. So there is the emotional side of it, but it's also saying a little more than that. And I really feel that I've enjoyed it so much, and I've also enjoyed listening so much, not just learning and performing, that I'd be very delighted to put it out there for people to enjoy it as much as I do.
That's incredible. See, that was so well articulated. Your life's work. I love it. Thank you. There are very few small questions on this podcast. I can guarantee you. I'm going to throw in the latest buzzword. Which is we are in this age of sort of the ascendance of AI and Gen AI, and everyone's looking. It looks like for shortcuts and hacks, and everything I see on social media. Someone saying these are the 3 tips you can use to create an incredible prompt, and you don't have to do the work. Basically, like it's
Right.
going to do it for you. How do you feel as a creative soul, really, as someone who's actually, this is also your life's work? You've also been someone who composes, who writes. So you're trained as a vocalist, you sing, you perform. And as you just said, you want to have sort of this field of music open to more and more people. How do you look at what's going on with Gen AI? I mean, there's obviously the side of the fact that it sort of flattens some hierarchies. It makes some things more accessible to people and so on. But are you worried about things like copyright? Are you worried about like what happens when there's sentience and what's going to be the value of the sort of human touch? What are some of your thoughts there?
I mean, of course, AI is the most burning hot topic right now, and it's arriving into our lives in through various manifestations. But I have to again say that the world of music has been dealing with some of these challenges even otherwise. Raised a very, very important point, that of copyright. Of course, with the AI, in the AI scenario, it can go completely haywire. But even otherwise, if you were to look at transitioning of anything that is in the folk or the classical realm into a more popular genre, whether it is, in film music or even in some kind of, some sort of electronica or, some sort of relatively newer genres, you will see that a lot of that music has been adapted and not necessarily with adequate acknowledgement of where it comes from, And that is the challenge of traditional music, because we don't necessarily, when we learn in the Guru Shishya Parampara, you learn a bandish and suddenly the next thing you know that this bandish is appearing in some random, whatever underground music somewhere in England, and you're suddenly shocked that, but I know this bandish, and you see that there's no acknowledgement of the author, or and therefore there's no question of having sought any permission. So this has been a challenge in the performing arts. I mean, how do you justify this kind of, I don't know, usurping, if you want to call it that, if it's not too extreme a word. So therefore, I think with the AI situation, it might become more sort of amplified, this problem, I do fear that. I can't deny that. But having said that, I feel that there is the humaneness of a performer or the craft itself is what people seek out when they go to listen to music. And if that comes through a machine, there are some things which I actually tried, sometimes looking for something on, say, a celebrated musician on some of these sites, but there's something missing when it comes through through that technology. And maybe as a musician, I tend to be more sensitive to it, and maybe it's not something that people will. On the other hand, I do worry for musicians, for instrumentalists, for accompanists, for all that wonderful acoustic world that we create around us in producing this music. Increasingly, that is being already being replaced by technology, and now with AI, I think it's going to go one step further. So it's not just the experience of the music or the production of it, but for me, as someone from the community, it's also a livelihood issue, which is something that I really worry about, and I really hope that there are going to be answers to, there are going to be some answers from some patrons on these critical questions.
Yeah, because it's such an important, you're right. You raise so many issues there that are relevant, and you're very, very pressing. I think, so one of my avatars is as a writer. And I feel like for a lot of writers, this has become, one of those do or die battles also. Like you can see some of the bigger names have obviously gone to court, but a lot of people are also looking at, there's so many things, I think, in this rush for convenience that we're forgetting, So for example, if I come back to what you started with as a child, and I was reading somewhere that your journey began at 12 is at the age of 12. So there'll probably be a lot of people who listen or watch this who will resonate with what you said. I mean, classical music training or dance, as you said, totally. I was not one of them. I was very uncoordinated. My mom tried her best, did not work out for me. But there are a lot of people I know who, I think there was something you just said, which reminded me, that's so relevant to today as well. The part of the drudgery, you called it. So the discipline of learning and going and wrote, and to learn any instrument as well, it's such a critical part of that training, right? So
Absolutely.
that, do you feel like that those kind of foundation blocks are going to be one of the first things to go? Because I feel like that might be one of the risks, right? Because if you're able to automate a lot of this, then how do you tell people that somehow the process is the reward also, right? In a way.
Absolutely. You're so right, Amrita. I can't tell you that, it worries me so much that the inability to engage with any knowledge system, whatever it might be, is what is happening right now, right? And I think the sheer that the voids that will create is going to take away from being able to enjoy your life. The joy of reading a book or the joy of listening to a bandish which plays for 40 minutes. I mean, just the sheer inability of your mind to be able to engage with it for that, the slowness of it, is really affecting us in ways that unfortunately are not in our face. You see, you don't understand how your brain is getting affected by the fact that it is becoming more and more and more limited in how it can process. That's such an important word that you used. So that worries me a lot because there's only so much of shallowness that one can survive with, right? And I'm not just talking about doing some heavy duty classical training or anything, but to be even to be able to enjoy it, you know, I think that is taking away from the beauty of the intangible world,
Yeah.
which has so much to offer and which is becoming more and more undervalued.
Yeah.
I don't know if
So
that answers your question, but
no,
yeah.
absolutely it does. I think you're right because we are all hearing about, our shorter attention spans. And then, I keep hearing from people that, I can't read a book anymore. I can't watch a movie anymore. And I realize actually, if you sit down and make yourself do it, like I was telling a couple of my friends, you will do it. It's also the surround sound we have of, there's too much fragmented attention, right? Like this, the attention economy and so on. But I do want to ask you. So when we look at, again, not a small question, so you can scoff and roll your eyes at me. So I've worked a lot with techies also and folks who maybe not from the humanities space or not sort of from the arts world, and I think this is something all writers hate also, so feel free to, as I said, throw something at the screen. But when people ask you what's the point, right, I know all of us have a very emotional and very visceral reaction to music that moves us or a story that, stays with us or something that resonates. A lot of people seem to remember that from their childhoods. They don't really maybe make time for these experiences as adults because life is just hectic and crazy and so on. But when somebody asks you to kind of help us define the value of art or culture or music, what would you say, if at all, you want to tackle this question?
Actually, it's a very difficult question to answer because sometimes you don't have, it's not like eating Maggie noodles, I mean, you can't find an instant
Yes.
response to say. I mean, I can't say, oh, if you listen to Bhimsen Joshi, you'll live 5 years longer. I can't make that kind of a connection. Or if you're listening to rap, the world will be a kinder place because of the politics that it offers. I can't make sort of these kind of sweeping connections. I think if we were to break it down, like how music has been an integral, I can only talk from the point of view of music because that's what I understand best. So how music has been an integral part of how we have lived all our lives. So even before we became a food processor, air fryer kind of a society, if my mother was doing the atta, dosa ka atta in that thing, there was always some humming happening. And that humming sort of adds to your sense of calm. It helps you center your brain processes. It works at so many levels. I mean, there are many reels which talk about what kind of hormones are being released when you listen to music and so on. So clearly there is a scientific connect there, which I don't need to sort of underscore here because there's enough that's been said about it. The other thing is that there's a very simple thing. If you listen to music, it evokes an emotion, right? So that means it is psychologically working with you. I mean, there can't be a more direct connect than that. Whether you're listening to, a film song, or you're listening to jazz, or you're listening to hip hop, every kind of music evokes a different kind of a response. It's not the same response. You won't feel repose when you're listening to hip hop, but you may feel some other kind of political high. So every kind of music, every genre has a certain kind of an emotion, an affect response that it evokes, which is a clear indication of how it works with us, of how it affects us at a psychological level, at an affect level. So if you're dancing to some nice music, your body is opening up, right? And it's such a liberating experience.
Yeah.
So there are clear indications. I mean, one doesn't have to really go into too much of a scientific understanding. If with it, with your own selves, with your own body, with your own mind, you see that you have a reaction to it. I mean, you have a reaction to something, you know that you're engaging with it, right?
Yeah.
So I think one should really look at it from a more basic point of view than
Yeah.
try to sort of say that, why should I make time for it? While on the other hand, I feel music has so much to offer. It can actually be an agenda for peace negotiations.
Yeah.
You look at the world of mystic poetry. I mean, it just opens up ideas of peace. It opens up ideas of syncretism. It opens up ideas of, it transgresses every conceivable social category that we've created. It takes away gender. You have Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Saab singing Bulle Shah, talking about a woman. So, music has so much to offer if only it is not treated only as a soft power.
Mm.
It's really about how you position it in society. My problem in today's situation is not that we don't have good music. We have great music and we have a lot of music. I don't have an issue with that. But I have a problem with how we position it. I have a problem with how it gets fused with entertainment. There's a difference between culture and entertainment, and I think we need to make that distinction. So when you have something for entertainment, go ahead, enjoy it. But if there's something which is in the space of culture, which has a little more to offer, which doesn't necessarily mean it's boring and who's going to bother with it. Food, food and music. There's so many intersections that one can look at, which can make culture a more, uh, you know, a living presence
Hmm.
rather than something which is just put on a pedestal and which is 5,000 years old.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, a living presence, exactly. And is that something that you feel like when when you're performing? I mean, especially in the performance where you really feel like you've hit it, or a performance that you go to. Is that, do you feel like you can, because there seems to be like this live wire, right? Like there's something that's going
Yeah.
on, right? That's
I think that's the best thing about live performances because every time you sing, your audience sort of comes back, hits you back with an energy. And it's such a high, whether it's people who are moved to tears or whether they're clapping or whether sometimes they just sort of break into a dance. So you have a variety of responses. And that's really and I think there's another myth around the kind of music that we practice, which is semi-classical or classical or whatever you want to call it. I mean, you have such fantastic audiences. You have such amazing footfall for so many of these concerts and performances that I think we need to sort of bust this myth that, especially in the context of sponsorship and
Hmm.
maybe even CSR and any kind of patronage, that numbers, how many people come. And I think it's time to sort of bust that a bit and sort of unpack it and, make it more available to people. Because a lot of people are really struggling to make a living off.
There is something I do want to ask you, because nowadays there's so much I think pressure on people in general to be performing constantly all the time, right? Like when it comes to, for example, social media. When it comes to performers and artists, how do you look at this kind of pressure to be a personal brand now? I feel like it's a lot more intense now than maybe it was 10, 15 years ago. It's kind of, you have to be on all the social networks, you have to know how to market yourself, you have to know how to create a brand out of your own identity. How do you see that balanced against what we tend to think of like as creatives or artists, and this kind
Yeah.
of tension?
In my own personal experience, when I try to sort of see whether I should hire someone to handle my social media, I get some really it's mind-boggling, because a lot of people who handle it, not to take away from their creative brilliance or anything, but it's quite a challenge to be able to explain, like what is it that one wants, because they are not necessarily connected with these words. So what I'm trying to explain here is that on the one hand, it's imperative to be on these various platforms, but on the other hand, a musician is not necessarily equipped to do it. So it's really hard because if you're savvy and if you know how to brand, how to sell, then hey, good for you. But if you're not, then okay, घर पे बैठ के रियाज करो और क्या, because a lot of organizers, for example, they'll first check out your some handle or the other and see how many followers do you have. That's the parameter that is used, which is I think a bit unfair, but that's the way it is. So it
Yeah.
is it is a lot of pressure, and you have to constantly be present, do things, and also do things which you may not necessarily always feel comfortable doing,
Yeah.
But yeah, just be there. And I think in that regard, younger artists are doing much better because they're just more comfortable and savvy because they've grown up with this, right?
Yeah.
Some of the older ones, or mid-career people, it's not always the fun thing to do. They'd rather be on stage.
Yeah, yeah, no, I hear you. I think, but so do you have any advice for younger singers actually, or older? Now that you mentioned, so the young ones tend to be digital natives, like you said, so they know how to do all of this. Is there something that's missing? Do you think in the rest of their experience that maybe our generation would have had that they don't have, and similarly for older?
I think young people these days, I could take some advice from them.
Yes, that's true.
They have so much to offer, and they've also sort of wrapped their head around, on how to deal with all of this. I find them very, very smart, and and I feel like okay, I could pick up a thing or two from that lot.
Yeah,
Um, but I mean, in terms of, not so much to young people, but I mean, to generally to people who are interested in music, I would definitely suggests that a little bit of discernment in listening to whatever it is that you are would make the life of a performer much more exciting. So I'll give you an example of what I'm trying to say here. So if I sing, say, a song like रंगी सारी गुलाबी चुनरिया रे मोहे मारे नजरिया सांवरिया रे. Okay, this is a traditional Chaiti. Okay, now Indian music, especially North Indian semi-classical music, is organized around seasons. Chaiti is the month that just left us. Just after Holi, you have the Chaitra Mahina, where this kind of a repertoire is sung, right? And this is considered semi-classical. And now that it's come into film, it's become hugely popular, this song, you know. So when when I'm talking to an organizer, I say, it's really nice, Vidya, try and make it a little less classical. And I'm trying to tell them, but this is not even classical, So, okay, I mean, whatever is something that people will understand. Now, my training is not to sing what people understand. My training is to sing what I want to, and people should enjoy it. But, artists have to constantly keep, revisiting their repertoire to sort of, to make the organizer happy. And I really feel like a little more curation so that the audience also gets what you're trying to say, or to create spaces for something which is not like flogged again and again would be nicer. So it's not something necessarily towards young people. I think I took your long question thing very seriously. My answers are tending to be much
I
longer
know.
than
And I just I need to ask you to sing again. When we're winding this down, I'm going to ask you to sing again. You have such a beautiful voice. I know it's such a stupid thing for me to say because obviously you do, but wow. And
Thank you.
I wanted to say, as an audience member, like I feel like you're right because we also do want to be elevated and understand more. Like, so I think that it's not about, dumbing things down because people don't get it. I think everyone I've met or any performance we've gone forever, you always, it is that kind of partnership with the performer where you kind of
So
want to.
actually, over the years, I have actually made a mission of this, and some of my work, the way I've sort of created productions or projects, is very much aimed at this idea of engaging with the audience so that they do feel informed and elevated at the end of a performance. So I'm deeply also interested in the social context, social histories of the music that I practice. So I try to bring that into performance. Tell a story, say share a quirky anecdote, or talk about a patron who was, like Wajid Ali Shah, who gave the Tumri presence in the world of Indian music. So a story or two, a name or two, an anecdote or two, like my project on the Gramophone Era is something that gets such a wonderful response. It's really mainstreaming voices of women performers in the Gramophone Era and looking at their contributions to the world of Indian music, which has not been adequately acknowledged. Now there's a lot more interest, but I started this 15 years ago, and yeah, and I do it in performance. I have a book, I have a website, and it just sort of connects many dots and helps people sort of unpack the idea of Indian music and feel comfortable with it.
Yeah. Oh, that's
And
incredible.
yeah, so I do a few such performances, and I feel deeply it excites me also, to do some research, find some exciting lyrics, find some silly ghazal some woman sang, which is totally meaningless, but it's so much fun. And so I also put it out there, and people find it funny, and also.
Yeah.
But that doesn't take away from my training. I mean, I don't change the nature of the rag or play around with it. I don't do that. I keep to that framework, but within that, there's so much to offer, really.
I'm definitely going to add those links to the show notes. I'll take them from you as well. That is fascinating. I do want to ask you a couple more questions. One, and then I'm going to ask you to sing something for us. Please, 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 please. One is over the course of your career, has anything changed in terms of how you look at things like success and failure? I think it's very different for the arts and otherwise, but also, as we progress through life, anything has anything changed or anything stayed with you?
I think the one thing that has changed my perception of my life and my music is COVID. Because, Amrita, for 2 years, there was absolutely no work in the performance world. And luckily for me, because like you pointed, I do write and I speak. And so I was like zooming away at that time for those 2 years and doing something or the others. Doing a Zoom concert was the funniest thing I've done because it felt like I'm
Yes.
sitting in a well and I didn't know if anybody was listening
Yeah,
because everybody had switched their videos off.
yeah.
But also, what happened to the fraternity, to the world of musicians, was just It was so scary. Several musicians who raised resources, support. I also created, what I did was actually I worked with young scholarship holding musicians from across the country through, of course, online sessions. I actually worked with them on how to use the digital space, how to use an online space. So for about 600 scholarship holders, we've done online workshops on how to create a YouTube channel, how to get onto Spotify, how to do a recording with limited resources. So that was a real wake up call, I think, for all of us. Because, yes, of course, we want to keep performing, never tire of it. We want to keep traveling, reaching out new audiences, yes, but that there can be a time when you can't do any of that was really scary. It was just so yeah. I mean, I think that was a very it sort of humbled you when
Yeah.
things came back, and now it's all like it's come back on really on adrenaline. Like how like there's so much happening.
Yeah.
So it's so you feel grateful, yes.
Yeah. And I didn't get a chance to ask you this, but was it ever a stressful decision for you or your family? You're choosing a career like this because it's also not, it's not the most common thing to do, despite how
Yeah,
much training and so on you might have. Was it ever stressful?
very. Yeah, because I could have, I mean, given that I was sort of drawn to work in the development sector, but I gave that up to be a full-time musician, and I had to take a very considered decision because I knew that I will not be making enough money. And I think in that regard, I'm very lucky to have had a supportive husband, a partner who's also from the creative world somewhat. So he sort of, how sometimes you just nag people with should I, should I? So finally he was like, listen, I think you should just do it because it's better to take a risk rather than to regret all your lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I'm just so relieved that I have no regrets.
That's really brave. I mean, we have to have a whole different conversation on like how people can choose and all of that.
No, even now people say things like, अच्छा, आप इतना अच्छा गाती है, वैसे आप करती क्या है? That
God.
still happens a lot. It's like, how can this be a profession? It can be a hobby,
Yeah.
that's still very much the Indian mindset.
Definitely, yeah. Hopefully, some people will, see the light after watching or listening to this. I do want to. So, two last questions for me. One is, this is not a very heavy question, I promise you. One is, do you do anything special to take care of your voice? I'm always very curious about these kind of things. How do you take care of it? It's such an important
Yeah,
instrument.
yeah. It's different for different people, but for me, the one thing that I'm obsessed about is physical fitness. I really feel that, fitness is something that we should all give a lot of importance to. So whether you're doing yoga or you're going to a gym or you're playing a sport, I'm absolutely committed to that, like 5 days a week. So I do that. I play badminton actually. That keeps my stamina really in good stead. It helps me in breathing and also our thing is like you keep sitting for long hours and, your back, your shoulder, everything, your knees. So it's very important to take care of one's body. And you also, most of us love food. Food and performance is very like, there's stories and stories about how who love their kebabs and who love their ghee and so on and so forth. So yeah, so we all love eating. So we have to be careful about our bodies. So that's one. And secondly, I avoid ice. I don't have ice at all.
Ah.
Ever.
And of course, I'm presuming
Therefore,
you've never smoked and you've never done terrible things to your, you know.
no.
Okay, that sounds like
I
a
was never
smart.
actually drawn to it, so I mean,
Yeah,
it's not even an issue.
yeah.
So
So
that's
no
something I had to
ice.
give up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't do ice at all.
And fitness.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of the physical fitness, but you're right. You need so much stamina also. I mean, that's such
Yeah,
a
I know a lot of artists when they hit their late 40s, 50s, डायबिटीज हो गया कोलेस्ट्रॉल हो गया होगा ही मतलब बैठे रहो आप पूरा पूरा दिन तो होने ही वाला है। खा रहे हो आप कि गले में you need strength and stamina.
yeah.
You have to be careful about it.
Oh, that's a really good tip. And final question for you is: you already touched upon this a bit, but gratitude. Anything you'd like to share that you're grateful for at this point?
Definitely. One, supportive family, my parents, my husband, my children. It's not easy for children to, there have been many times they've asked me questions like, why can't you do a normal job and things like that. So why you always at home? Why you always either out or always at home? So they have also actually adjusted a lot, given our unconventional lifestyles. So family, yes, number one. Secondly, actually not secondly, I mean, everything is first out there. deeply, deeply grateful to all my gurus really, who have, I've just been lucky because they've been very generous. And, given the kind of situations a lot of artists have gone through where they've had very tyrannical gurus who would be very conjuice about how much they share. Never. I think my gurus have been very large-hearted. And they've not only shared their music with me, they've also shared how one should approach one's music. What is your connect from, what is your life and therefore what is your music? I think that's very important. At the end of the day, Amrita, what you sing on stage is also who you are. That generosity comes from a guru who is willing to share. So I'm deeply, deeply grateful to my gurus who taught me Carnatic music, Shubha Mutkalji, who gave me so much when I learned Khayal Gaiki with her, and a lot of Bhakti repertoire as well under her training. Then I learned with Shanti Hirananji, who was a student of Begum Akhtar, so that opened up another world of women singers, their struggles, and therefore our privileges, and so on and so forth.
That's so beautiful. There's so much happening. There's so much going on that we didn't know that's behind the scenes. Thank you for sharing that, that insight and that look and taking some of us on that journey with you. I definitely hope we can chat with you again down the line. There's so much to learn.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to have you. I think you're the first singer on the Say Again podcast.
Yay.
And I'm going to definitely put a shout out to anyone, any corporate, honchos. We need more patrons.
We don't take much. We don't take much. We're not, we're not like, we don't need to fill up Wembley stadiums, etc. We're very modest people and we give you good music. You'll like it.
Good music, beautiful experience, very wholesome. And yes, we need more patrons of the arts. Vidya, will you sing something for us as we wind down for our audience? Anything you like.
Okay.
You can give us a little context and you can, yeah.
Okay. I'll sing you something from my project, Women on Record. It's a song that was a film song. It's one of the first few film songs done by a woman music director. Since we all love film music, I'm going to share something from a film which was done in the 30s. And the woman who recorded it who made music, who directed the song, her name was Saraswati Devi. And this is really a tribute to her because she was the one who brought playback singing to Hindi cinema. Since you asked for a context, I'm just giving a little story. कित गए हो खेवनहार, कित गए हो खेवनहार, नैया डूबती, नैया डूबती, कित गए हो खेवनहार, बिछड़ गए मोरे संग संगाती, बिछड़ गए मोरे संग संगाती, नाव खेवैया जीवन साथी, नाव खेवैया जीवन साथी, अब कौन लगावे पार, या डूब के किस गए हो खेवनहार. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. This was like a personal concert. Thank you so much. I love that. And thank you for the context. That was really helpful. I'm really going to make sure everyone stays to the end of the chat to listen to this and pick out a teaser. Thank you so much, Vidya, for taking the time. It's been a delight to chat with you. And hopefully see you somewhere that's not a huge, massive festival where you're, bombarded by crowds. I'll hope to see you.
We could do that too.
We could both. We'll do both. Thanks so much.
Thank you.